Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm Meredith Preuss, and I'm the Executive Director of the Gordon and Marion Smith Foundation for Young Artists, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the third installment of Art Education for Life, the speaker series at the Gordon Smith Gallery. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations, whose ancestral and unceded land the Gordon Smith Gallery is located on. Art is a medium of engagement and dialogue, and through artwork and public programs like this, we support the exploration of identity, relationship building, and shared history on this land. So I would like to extend my gratitude to Artists for Kids, our programming partner and the educational arm of our organization. For those unfamiliar, Artists for Kids was founded in 1989 with a singular mission: to support art education for all. With the help of notable Canadian artists like Gordon Smith, Jack Shadbolt, and Bill Reid, Artists for Kids developed a limited edition portfolio that has grown to become one of the most significant print collections in Canada. In addition to the year-round fundraising work that the Smith Foundation does, this portfolio directly funds a range of educational initiatives: residencies, art camps, scholarships, and acquisitions for both Artists for Kids and the Gordon Smith Gallery's permanent collection. On November 7th, the portfolio will release 4 new prints from contemporary Canadian artists, all of which are currently on exhibition in the lobby. If you're interested in any of those, you may subscribe to our newsletter to be notified when they're available for sale, and you can use the QR code that's on the wall outside to do so. So Art Education for Life is a 5-part speaker series that brings together voices from diverse fields, each sharing how art education has profoundly shaped their journeys. Today, we're honored to welcome OR Gallery Director and former Gordon Smith Gallery Guest Curator, Jenn, who will be speaking with the artists and Order of British Columbia recipient Xwalacktun, along with artists James Harry and Lauren Brevner. They will explore how their work has been influenced by traditional Coast Salish art practices, as well as by cross-cultural contemporary art and formal art education. Later in the series, in November, we're going to hear from Jeremy Shaw and Andrew Booth, who will discuss how Jeremy's early exposure to art through Artists for Kids shaped his visual art career. The series will close with a conversation between Dr. Maya Geddes and Dr. Randy McIntosh, both of whom are neurologists, on how art influences their work in brain science. I'd like to extend a special thanks to the O'Dane Foundation for their support of this speaker series and sponsors Polygon Homes and Anthem Properties. We are grateful for the additional support provided by the North Vancouver Rec and Cultural Commission and the North Vancouver School District. I'm just going to read some bios and introduce everyone, and then hand the floor over to Xwalacktun, who will be performing a welcome song. So artists Lauren Brevner and James Harry have been collaborators since 2014. Brevner's practice is deeply inspired by her Japanese and Trinidadian heritage, as well as matriarchal influences, while Harry's practice combines traditional Squamish forms and designs. They create meditative compositions that invite cross-cultural dialogue and embrace multiple expressions of personal, political, social, and spiritual practices. Their work ranges from large-scale public artworks to intimate portraits, incorporates a wide breadth of materials, and engages and bridges community through generous relationality. Xwalacktun is an internationally recognized Squamish artist. Xwalacktun was born and raised in Squamish and carries with him the rich ancestries of his father and mother. He was given his Indigenous name by his father, Pekultun, thank you, who is a hereditary chief originally from the Seymour Creek area in North Vancouver. Xwalacktun attended Emily Carr University and Capilano College, and credits both with helping him acquire skills in starting his career. His endurance and deep commitment to community has propelled his practice as an artist. He's received numerous honors and awards, including the honorary doctorate from Emily Carr University in 2022, the BC Achievement Foundation Award for Distinction for Lifetime Achievement in 2016, the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2013, and the Order of British Columbia in 2012. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Xwalacktun, who will be welcoming us here today.
You're welcome. I was going to throw a little bit of humor in there, right? So I'll do kind of 2 verses, because normally we would sing in 4. And we do ceremony in 4. We usually do it counterclockwise because we actually move with Mother Earth. We move in that direction when we do our ceremony. So I want to sort of like clear the floor first, and then give it more of a greeting song more from my mother's side, because we're coming from the Quagus, from the Namgis, and the Sḳwx. Whoa, whoa, ho, 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 hey. Whoa, ho, 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 hey. Whoa, ho, hey. Whoa, ho, ho, hey. Whoa, ho, hey. Ah, ah, yeah. Whoa, whoa, ho, ho, hey. Whoa, ho, ho, hey. Whoa, ho, hey. Whoa, ho, ho, hey. Whoa, ho, hey. Ah, ah, yeah. Yo, yo, yeah. Whoa, ho, yeah. Whoa, ho, hey. Oh, hey, yeah. Hoo, yeah, hey, yeah. Whoa, yeah. Whoa, yeah. Whoa, hey. Oh, yeah. Hey, oh, yo, hey, yeah. Oh, hey, yeah. Oh, hey, oh, hey, yeah. Ooh, hey, yeah, hey, yeah. Whoa, hey, yeah. Whoa, hey, yeah. Oh, hey, oh, hey, yeah. Hi-yo. Osiam, big welcome on behalf of Artists for Kids and Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. Osiam, thank you.
Thank you, Xwalacktun.
Osiam, thank you.
Thank you. Your generosity and teachings ground us and reverberate deeply in my own understanding of these territories. We raise our hands to you and the light that you bring to each of us today. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful day of atmospheric river rain. We appreciate that you've all made your way here for a conversation with Xwalacktun, Lauren Brevner, and James Nexw'Kalus-Xwalacktun Harry. I'm Jenn Jackson. I am currently appointed the Director Curator at Or Gallery, and I've had the honor of working on many projects, wonderful projects with Lauren, James, and Xwalacktun, including exhibitions, public art projects, community panels such as this one. Today we will discuss mentorship and education as it relates to the artist's broad practices. Together, we'll delve into the diversity of their individual approaches and collective commitments to Indigenous representation in intersectional collaboration. The conversation that we will share acknowledges calls for Indigenous sovereignty across and in solidarity with communities near and far. It offers an opening for discussing the ways that we can stand with each other and direct our voices to powerful change. Oh, and we also have a very special guest with us today, a big inspiration for all of us, Hannah. Hi, Hannah. We'll start off maybe our conversation today with you, Xwalacktun. Much of your creative artwork speaks to community healing, growth, and education as an artistic practice. You've worked on numerous projects, locally, nationally, and internationally, many of which the carvings were created in public while directly engaging with community. I am hoping that you can tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this method of creating art in public, directly with community, and how it relates to the ways that you share stories of lived experience and collaborate and mentor the people that are around you.
First of all, to help create community is, through our teachers, from our parents, through high school, through elementary school. And I just kind of picked up things because people were feeding or noticing my talents in the art world. And I said, wow, I do like the art world, but can I make a living off it, right? But because at the beginning, I know when I was little, I used to love drawing. So my older brother, I saw his work. I said, wow, I want to be able to do that. So I started to draw also. And I don't think I ever stopped since then. So now that's over 60 years of drawing. So I felt that inspiration from others. So I continually get inspired. Even today, I get inspired today, even by my son here, or my other boys, or my daughter. They inspire me with some things that they say or do. So I'm learning from them also. I'm not only teaching it, but so it takes all of us to participate in that. So I sat down this morning having a coffee with one of my teachers, my first art teacher in high school that I remember, and her name was Mrs. Soloway, and her daughter came to visit me. And she said, well, I got something I want to give you. My mother wanted you to have. It's okay, sure. Well, we had a nice little visit. So she inspired me. And all the teachers in the art was at the college then, at Emily Carr College of Art. They inspired me, showed me, taught me. And I went in as a printer, but came out more just sticking with the sculpture. And so there's just being inspired by others to help direct your way. And I just love working with people, especially little ones. Because after I graduated from Emily Carr, I ended up going to like a conference. And they told me, come as you are, and I did. It was very hot. I had Adidas shorts on. I had a white t-shirt. I'm walking down towards the North Vancouver Outdoor School. I'm walking down there and I see everybody sitting around in a circle, but they're all dressed really well. I said, what? They told me come as I are, so I did. Everybody's dressed nice. So I put my t-shirt on. And I sat down beside this lady, and she says, because we know each other, she goes, hold on. Oh, it was Rick then. Rick, you're not wearing anything. And then one of the elders said, he started naming me Sṃwx. Sṃwx means naked one. So, in our culture, we humor, and I like carrying that humor when I'm working amongst public, because I did a lot of directive drawing, storytelling with children, and what I got out of that is seeing their big smiles and say, "Wow, I drew that." Because I would draw a line, they'd follow one step at a time. I tell stories, and if there's a break, I drum and sing to them while they're coloring. By the time they went home with a story and a nice picture. And that might show up on the slides here, like I had worked with kids and they go home and tell their story. And some of those kids are parents now, and I taught some of their kids. And they would come, this man taught me when I was in grade 3. What? So, it's that good feeling of, helping a little one create something and they feel so proud of it. And I would get their attention, first of all, by, especially little ones like kindergarten. I get on the board because a lot of them might have problems following me. I says, don't worry about what it looks like. I'm going to show you my first drawing I ever did in my life. So I put up a piece of paper, looking at the kids sitting down, and I start scribbling, sticking my tongue out. because I'm trying to make that connection with them. Then I'd say, you know what happened to that drawing? My parents put it on the fridge. And I felt so proud that I had my picture on the fridge, right? So I wanted them to feel that and say, hey, you go home and you did a real good job. I says, everybody sees things differently. If we think of an eagle design from here to the Quagga to the northern style, we all have eagle designs, but they're all different. So I says, just by looking at those styles, we all see things different. We want to interpret it our own way. So those kids go home feeling good that their drawing doesn't have to look like mine. And I've used artwork for healing journeys. I was carving this one up in Haida Gwaii. And it's a bear. I actually started signing my artwork with a bear because I took the bear's life for no reason. And I felt bad. It's a long story. So I started using the bear's signature to say, I'm carrying on this bear's spirit, right? So this is the bear I had on one of my vehicles. I'm wearing the bear here, claws here. I wore that for a lot of years. And this is like a rebirth of myself being reborn. Just processing my own healing. How am I going to heal myself, right? So things start popping in my head when I start carving. I start learning from it. This beautiful person here, she's an artist now too. She is an artist. She helped me in a journey in healing and growth. Jennifer. Jennifer, right? Yeah. So it's important. Once I could heal myself, I was able to help others. And just out of humor, out of fun, of creating, just allowing it to happen, I started learning about this myself because I didn't have a teacher teaching me all this. I just went through a process and learned on my own. And what can I do to uplift myself? Through culture, through song, through stories, through dance, through children. They taught me love too. He was 5. Dad, can I help? You sure can, son, by staying off the way.
I get that.
But he turned out, because he was so interested in the art world, he's doing well. And same as Austin, he's doing awesome. And I got another little guy who I'm training right now. He's 9, but I don't train them. As long as they're interested, I'm training them. I just allow it to happen. Good.
Thank you, Xwalacktun. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your work in the Lower Mainland school system. You've been working in education since 1982, and you've done carving at schools, and you talked about teaching and doing drawings with children, but also you've engaged kids with big projects like carving. And if you can tell us maybe about one of those projects or that experience for you.
Yeah, I've done many public art, and I included the public people. Even in Scotland, I did public artwork in Scotland. Got 34 poles in Scotland. A lot of people help carve it, help design it, help raise it. And the schools here in the Lower Mainland, I do big projects and I let them take wood off. And as they carve, I kept educating. Well, when we finish this, you tell people you carved that piece. When you have children, you're going to tell them, I carved that. But amongst, hundreds of other kids that helped. Because some of the projects, after we completed it, some big wall pieces, I had every child sign the back. They all took part in this carving. So now it's there for however long it might be. Because I've been to a school in Scotland that was 500 years old. And there's a carving there that's been sitting in there for 500 years. And I say, well, this carving could be here for 500 years too. It'll have your name on the back, right? So they feel good about that, and they take ownership of the work.
I've learned a lot from you over the years personally, but I also have seen the ways that the ways that your mentorship is reciprocal and that you learn from the people that are around you. And I just, Aaron Nelson Moody did a talk at the West Vancouver Museum a few weeks ago, and he really talked about the reciprocity in your mentorship and the ways that you can learn and teach one another, even when you're bringing people under your wing. And you've done that with many, many community members, including Skszwx. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that reciprocity and the ways that you learn from those that you also teach.
Yes, some projects I've done, I was doing some Coast Salish design, but didn't really get into it until about 1990. And I was inspired by another artist, Charles Elliott. He's a Coast Salish artist on Vancouver Island. And I did a big metal project in Ambleside Beach. And when I unveiled that one, I asked him if he could be there. And he says, why do you want me there? I said, because you inspired me. He didn't know it, but you inspired me. He didn't teach me, but I saw his work. That inspiration helped me say, okay, I got to really focus on Coast Salish design now. Because I was doing more like Northern style, right? Because there was a market for that, so that was easy to do. I can do that. But now to move into Coast Salish design was another awesome challenge. And when Splash, we were doing that together, and he went away he got a grant to go around search Salish artwork in New York and Europe, and he came back, and I learned from him also about how these designs work together. And I didn't understand it until we started talking about it more and working in it.
Thank you, Xwalacktun. Lauren, collaboration and mentorship have played a significant role in the evolution of your practice. I've seen it over the years that we've worked together. Can you tell us more about your artistic journey, the ways that you've sought out community, the shape of your intersectional collaborations with James and Hannah and Xwalacktun, integrating your own identity, your Japanese Trinidadian identity, and thinking about connections with your own family, and maybe the ways that mentorship has shaped your perspective on arts education, being someone who's self-taught.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking about, as Xwalacktun was speaking, my first introduction to the Harry family, and he actually came to my elementary school. So I met Xwalacktun before I met James in grade 5. Actually, I don't think we formally met, but I just remember you were carving a project in the gymnasium, and I was peering in the window, so curious, wanting to participate, and just so interested in what he was doing. But yeah, my journey, I started out, I grew up in a very religious home, so my access to culture started quite late. We weren't allowed to watch any cable, we didn't have internet until post-high school, so I always felt a little bit behind with just what was happening in the world, but I always felt like I didn't know what was going on, and just behind, I guess. And so after high school, I moved to Japan, and I did an apprenticeship with Sin Nakayama, who I met through basically like a Japanese Craigslist out there, and I did an apprenticeship for a year, and he was also self-taught, and he gave me the courage to return home and just start, because I always had this, I just had this complex about post-secondary education. Nobody in my family had gone to post-secondary education, so I just felt like it was something completely inaccessible. And so when I came home, I just started working away in my bedroom, and I actually reconnected with James, and he was just going into Emily Carr at that time, and he was trying to get me to come to Emily Carr. But I just continued, learning, mainly online, really. That was a lot of my education, and again, because I didn't have access to the internet in an early age, it was like this tsunami of information that it was just, I was a sponge, and I couldn't get enough. And then years later, that must have been about 10 years after high school, 8 or 10 years after high school, I was a full-time practicing artist, and that's when James came back into my life. At that point, I was very much in the commercial art world in the States, and I was burnt out, and I felt like an art making machine, and I very much needed almost like an escape from my own practice. And at the time, James also was at a bit of a crossroads with his work, I would say. And so we started collaborating together almost as an escape from our own individual practices, and then started working, and ultimately it just came from joy and love. I'd say our practice, I think a lot of people connect with it, the accessibility of it, because it's just pure love. And out of that collaboration, I mean, we became life partners, and now we have Hannah, and I see our practice as really just joy. And also having met Xwalacktun, having him in my life, meeting the family. James also comes from a very artistic family. Nobody in my family is an artist. And yeah, the amount of generosity that he moves through the world with has affected me deeply, and I feel like that's a big inspiration for myself and how I want to continue my work. And of course, now that I have Hannah, seeing how James grew up, I want her to have that same access to art. And I find it funny because we have a studio at home, more of an office, but she calls it the art. And so she says, "Mom, can I go in the art?" And I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. She's surrounded by it. It's just her world. And I feel like James had that too, and I just love that she has that. And that's my main motivator in life now as a mother, I would say.
I love the story of one of you and James' first collaborations. You were working in Chinatown together in your studio, and together collaborating on this piece, and it was taking time. It was taking time and more time, and Xwalacktun was observing you two working together, and you were maybe having questions about your collaboration and the meanings of your collaboration together. This is before you were together. And Xwalacktun, we could say, inspired you or maybe forced you by telling you that he had put your name forward to participate in an exhibition that he was going to be in with a very pending deadline.
Yes. Basically, we had been working on our first piece, Snom, for about 2 years, and this is where our whole collaboration started, was with this carving and painting, quite large piece that was very ambitious at the time. And yeah, it was about 1.5 years into this piece, and it just felt like, as much as it was amazingly fun to collaborate on, it was just this never-ending piece that we're just like, well, this is not sustainable to have a collaborative practice when it takes years to create one single piece. But Xwalacktun came to our studio and was like, okay, so you have a show in Chinatown in a month, and this piece is in it, so get to work. You have no choice, this is happening. And I remember sitting there, and we talked to him about all these things, and like the stresses of life, and you know, the having to pay the bills and all the realities of art practice. And he was just like, none of that matters. This is important. What you're doing is extremely important, and you need to do it, so you have no choice. So get to work. And then he left, and we did that show, and it was amazing. And that was the beginning of getting feedback on our collaborative practice as well, being really like, yeah, kind of continuing that. It was it was a big push in a positive direction, I would say, for our work together.
This question is open to response for anyone, but maybe Lauren, you want to start off about the importance of the intersectionality of your collaboration, and why Xwalacktun, you've really encouraged people to come together from very different places. Xwalacktun, you just came back from a residency in Africa where you were engaging and speaking with other traditional practices of carving. What is it that that coming together of people from maybe different perspectives, what is the importance of that to you?
I mean, for me, I think it's extremely important. Again, it's that accessibility piece. It really opens the door for the work to be taken in by as many people as possible, which again, it's a huge part of our work. But ultimately, I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm hearing intersectional collaboration come up quite a bit. But of course, it is intersectional collaboration. But again, because James and I are partners in life, it's so much more complex than that. I mean, I think I could talk endlessly, even just working with your spouse as well, and the challenges and the positives and negatives of that. But intersectional collaboration in general is just, yeah, it's opening the doors to more amazing conversations that need to be had.
And much of your work after your collaboration and your exhibition invitation from Xwalacktun, you ended up really delving into working in partnership in public realm, doing large-scale murals all over the Lower Mainland, and then you had a two-story mural in the Vancouver Special Disorientations and Echoes exhibition, and kind of having these intersections between the contemporary art world and this kind of public art realm. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of embedding your collaborations in public spaces that are accessible to everyone, all times of day?
Well, I think especially murals are one of the most pure forms of public art in a way. I mean, especially we install our own work, so of course, being out in community, having to get to know the community so that they trust you and continue to be stewards of your work after you leave that community. I've seen many murals be, tagged or not taken care of because the engagement wasn't there, that groundwork wasn't there. And so, yes, the accessibility piece, you can see it at any time, but also putting in that labor, putting in that connection to community so that they continue to take care of your piece and they understand it and they're a part of the story is just so amazing. And that's why I think personally, like, murals are my favorite form of public art. But we've done many different projects and many different materials, and yeah, I keep saying it, I sound like a broken record, but it is ultimately the accessibility piece. I really think it's just extremely important.
Thank you, Lauren. James, your artistic and educational journey has been quite broad. You've had your mentorship from a young age with your dad, and mentorship within community, more formal training at a university setting, and onwards to forging new relationships with fabricators and developing innovative new approaches to public art. You've bridged traditional carving with contemporary approaches, all while also creating like reciprocal teaching opportunities. Working with you, I've learned so much. And you elevate your project collaborators, both of you, all of you, into understanding Coast Salish approaches along the way. Your recent collaborative exhibition with Lauren the 7th, which was hosted at Aura last year, had a strong focus on providing educational resources. The community that came into the exhibition was hungry for that knowledge and to learn and to understand Coast Salish principles of design, the visual language of the circle, crescent, and trigon. I truly feel that through these educational initiatives, you've become a leader in the field of public art, and sharing the importance of Indigenous representation on the territory. I'm wondering if you can tell us more about your journey and the ways that you've centered Indigenous education, and maybe you can tell us about your strong sense of that importance.
Yeah, well, I guess it really all kind of stems with him, and actually my grandma being part of, she was a principal of an elementary school. My mom has been involved with like art therapy and working with children, and like being a social worker as well, and just like I've just been surrounded by education my whole life, and I've really kind of had that approach through my work, which was really thinking about like how do we bring this knowledge, because really that's what I'm doing. A lot of these spaces I'm educating as I go with the artwork, at the same time trying to sort of redefine what is Salish art in a contemporary way, because we're trying to bring all of this awareness, and it's still really at a point where we're trying to understand it ourselves. Even within the Squamish Nation, there's probably only like, how many, 6 or 8 people who actually do practice Coast Salish art. The number's growing, but like out of 4,000 members, 300 of them are full-time artists, and 8 of them practice Coast Salish art. And so there's this real importance and sort of urgency as well to like not only just educate the public, but our own people, that we need to bring more of this identity back, because it's important. Like my dad was saying, we're Sṃwx, we're Namgis. Those are northern types of First Nations artwork that doesn't come from this territory. And although we can practice those forms, it's been through, the same thing that my dad's been saying, is that we need to practice Coast Salish art because we're on Coast Salish territory. So that's really been sort of the foundation of everything, really, is how do we educate the public, and like you're saying, like with everything that's happening in the cities, like with development that's happening there, I see projects going up all the time, that it's really a shame that a lot of these projects is really, the majority of it isn't going to Coast Salish art. And still yet, like there's like all these policies that are in place. We have artists that are competing with international artists. And really, if you dig down and get into the roots and the nitty-gritty of like the history of the land, those histories are literally being paved over every time those artworks aren't being selected. So that's really been sort of the forefront of how, when we're creating like artwork in public spaces, is that it's not just about the artwork, it's about the forms. They come from the land. We're trying to bring them back to the land. If I'm imagining people coming from around the world and they come here, I want them to know that this is my identity, not somewhere from the north, or we're talking about, I always bring up in my presentations the pictures of the Stanley Park totem poles, because it's one of the most highly photographed places in Western Canada, and most of the world knows First Nations for being they carved totem poles, but really we didn't carve totem poles here. And people are like, wow, I didn't know that. Like every time I say that in a room, there's probably one of you probably thought that. I can say that tonight, is that we are trying, that's kind of the struggle that we're trying to do, is that, we're saying, look, these didn't belong here. We're sort of generalized into this like identity that's kind of broad stroking us. And that's really been really what we do, and when we come in, especially with public art projects, when we have a successful piece that goes up, that's like a really big win for us, because that's saying like this is who we are, and we're being recognized. So I know it's sort of a long-winded around, but
Thank you. I, in my experience working with you on many different public art projects, you are not only thinking of the end goal of the ways in which these works become embedded in public realm, but also you spend time with the consultants that you work with the fabricators, with the engineers, the architect, the landscape designers. You're continually bringing so much knowledge to the table with them, even within the constraints of the field of public art. I'm wondering if maybe it might be helpful, we don't have a visual reference on the screen. Actually, is it possible to make the lights a little bit lower so that people can see the... Thank you, Sophia. But to share with the audience the kind of the difference between these northern forms and all the way down. They'll sort it out. Between the more northern forms and the forms that you're talking about, the Coast Salish forms and that representation, and it might be useful for them to hear that in relation to material approaches and carving, because that's how you first explained to me this principle of the forms that we see here and how they're produced.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the forms themselves, and I don't know if it'll actually come up on the screen, but there's like actually there's a really big difference between the two. And when you put them side by side, you can see that one's actually based in the idea of, it's like more additive, like it's kind of more like you're painting in the forms, which is more form line, where you've got your U shape and your ovoid, and those are sort of the building blocks and the foundation of like Haida art, Tlingit art, even Sṃwx and Namgis, like those were all sort of the forms that you would use, whereas Coast Salish art would be based in the negative. So the exact opposite of that is you're carving away the forms to reveal the space. So you're sort of using those forms to insinuate another form. So it's like, it's it's there, but it's not there in a lot of ways, which is like really an interesting way to think about it, because you're thinking about non-space as much as you're thinking about the space that it's taking up. So there's really an interesting thing that's happening there, and that's really been the premise of how I thought, trying to educate people about Coast Salish art is it can be seen in so many different ways that wouldn't necessarily be like the traditional way that you might think of it as. And I think especially from our show, there was a lot of opportunities for us to kind of engage in that conversation from like even a Japanese perspective. When we went and traveled to Japan, we were looking at examples of the design elements from there, and like there was a lot of like, we could pick out similarities and things, and it was just really thinking about that thing that we're talking about, space and non-space. So like really interesting dialogues that were happening within our show. But I don't know, without actually seeing examples of it, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but yeah, it's...
I like to describe it, especially we had a lot of elementary schools and high school students come into the 7th, and we would like get out some paper and get them to draw a circle, and we would talk about you're adding the line and you're creating the line and you fill it in, and then we would get them to like cut the circle out, and so we would say you're subtracting the material, and it really helped them to kind of understand that perceptual shift in the representation of Northern and Coast Salish. You just returned from an important summit in Toronto, bringing together a number of Indigenous groups internationally, and had conversations around the Indigenous Design Charter. I'm wondering if you can tell us about things that you learned there, but also things that you were able to share.
Yeah, for sure. That was a really exciting summit. It's called the Yarning Circle, and it was introduced by the Deakin University in Melbourne. And they've partnered with OCAD University, and it was held in Toronto. And it was a really interesting moment because it was just really leaders from around the world in Indigenous art, whether that's architecture, landscape architecture, design, art. They're all coming from all these really diverse backgrounds, and really what they were doing was bringing different stories from communities from all around the world. And it was just really interesting to kind of hear perspectives in just how far along some countries are compared to Canada, or how far behind they are compared to Canada, or Canada is far ahead in Vancouver, but slow behind in Toronto or Ontario. So it was just really, it was refreshing for me to hear it, because often I find myself that I'm only one of the only people in these spaces, trying to, often I'm presenting to panels full of people from backgrounds that know nothing about art, first of all, or don't know anything about First Nations people, city delegates that maybe might not be as progressive. So I always find myself in a place of I have to educate these people, and that's the way I always approach it, is because I have to assume that nobody in the room knows, and I'm like a broken record, I feel like, but but it was really refreshing for me because my stories are the same as theirs, and it kind of made me feel like I'm not the only one. And they're introducing a design charter to Canada that was developed in Australia that was meant to be sort of this guidebook, or if you're coming into a project where there might be a massive development, or developers and architects are wondering how to engage with the local First Nations, it's sort of like a how-to, like this is how you respectfully go about doing this process and engaging with the local First Nations. And that's sort of how they've developed it around the world, is that every location you go to is going to have a First Nations group that has a certain set of protocols and ways of doing things that, it's a hard space to enter, but once you enter it, it's like you realize it isn't that hard, And I think that's where we're at. I think, having a mentor like my dad has been like really helped us get ahead, and we're sort of now taking the next step and sort of taking on the torch, and we're able to, these are really difficult spaces to enter, and, I think the more spaces that we can sort of change, the faster things at a large scale will change.
Thank you, James. I'm going to move, this brings us really nicely to my last question, but I'll just put it out to the audience to start thinking about if you have questions to put your question caps on. This is to all three of you, and maybe each of you can speak to this question in relation to what James was just saying about these kinds of context briefs or educational resources or guides or points of connection for people to understand the territories that they're on and the host nations that they're in relation to. What dreams for the future do you envision for Indigenous representation, intersectional collaboration and education here on this territory, Squamish-Tsleil-Waututh territory, but also our Musqueam territories? What kind of dreams do you have for education, whether it's from K to 12 or post-secondary or other types of resources? I know from having conversations with all of you that there's many dreams for different accessible spaces that maybe aren't necessarily those institutions that we're familiar with, and maybe there's other ways that we can start dreaming. So I would love to hear from all of you and for our audience to hear from you what those dreams might be for our future spaces.
Guess I'll start. Well, I actually feel like it's already happening, and like for me, it started when I started actually being in the classroom, teaching art, some storytelling, and sharing. So I started that feeling the movement happening, and that all took off with a lady by the name of Ann Siegel. And I was just a young person. So she helped me develop a way of expressing the art and sharing it. And I was doing more northern style than at the time. So from there, as I went along, it was already happening. I'm starting to feel proud of who I am, but I wasn't there yet with the Coast Salish art. Right, so it's developing. So I feel it's happening. It's in the schools, it's in the public, it's in some government areas. You know, like I did a piece with at the City Hall in West Vancouver, and also here, I did a piece here. So it was educating people, and it's given that good feeling, you know, of the area, you know, and actually bringing people together. And so one of our teachings is that we're all in the same canoe together, that we're going to move forward together. But in order to move forward, we got to pull together as one and move at the same time and focus. So I think I'll leave it at that part.
Thank you.
Oh, got your own mic.
I guess maybe another really big thing that came out of those conversations was that I think they kind of narrowed it down to it is a population problem, that we don't have enough Indigenous people in these spaces. It's also a systematic problem. Like a lot of our youth are not in spaces where they have access to education. And then the third thing is we need to start with education, teach them at a young age that this is what is from this territory. You know, they were saying, I think also like there was somebody who was like a immigrant here recently, and he was just saying to me, like, I wish I knew, like, I came here and I didn't know anything, and like you taught me all this stuff about like this land and this territory. How do I get access to that? Like I didn't even know where to look. And my answer was, well, like let's just have like it be a prerequisite to this country that this is, you have to learn this. Like this is, you know, especially newcomers coming to the country, it's like you need to learn about the First Nations people from the territory that you're going to move to. Or you, you know, like from education standpoint, like Lauren and I, when we were going to elementary and high school, the only First Nations groups we learned about was the Métis and Louis Riel, and that's it. Like we didn't learn anything about here. And, you know, we're going to school here on Coast Salish territory. Like we grew up in New Westminster. So it needs to be more ingrained into how we're raising our youth and children. And Because if I see Hannah going to elementary school, I'm not going to want her to be in a school where they're not properly representing her identity, right? And I'm now able to see that from when I back out. I can see that. So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about, and eventually love to, if we have enough resources, create a Coast Salish school that is really defined in a space where it's led by Indigenous people, and it can be, we can have great teachers come in and do some directive drawing classes. Would be the dream, and of course those dreams take time, and it's conversations like this where those kind of things start.
Yeah, piggybacking on what James said, that's exactly my long-term dream, mainly, again, for Hannah. Not everyone is going to get to grow up with Xwalacktun as their grandpa and James Harry as their dad and be so enveloped and so connected to Coast Salish design and art. Just like me, thinking back to my exposure to art. And so having a place where people can go to learn from community. The past 10 years being a part of this family, I've had an amazing education, and I'm so lucky to be so close to amazing mentors and educators. But yeah, we get asked that question a lot, especially me, not being a part of the community. How do you access? How does one educate themselves? And it's such a complicated answer. It's really about exposing yourself, showing up and participating with community. And even then it's like, okay, well, how do I participate community? How do I show up? And it's not straightforward. And so my dream would be that it would be a lot more straightforward, a lot more accessible, like James said, at a young age, but to everyone of all ages. It should be easy, and it should be, less complicated, I guess.
Thank you. I think we can all learn and dream together with the three of you, and thinking about advancing Indigenous leadership in the arts, the importance of Indigenous representation in public realm, the ways that we inform multiple publics of the histories of Indigenous people in the regions that we live, the importance of Indigenous self-determination and agency to share these futures with the arts and cultural landscape, to be the leaders in those spaces, and to be developing all of the kinds of structures and systems around them. I would love to now open the floor to any questions from audience. I think we have a few minutes for a couple questions, Meredith.
We'll see him.
My question is mostly for James, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the conference in terms of the charters for local art and design, and is the aim to kind of define what the local art culture is? Or if you could speak a little bit more to that, please. Thank you.
So the one that they were introducing was developed for Australia and New Zealand, and they tried to be as loose as possible with the charter because every community was different. When it was introduced to Canada, it was a lot different because there was far less dialects and First Nations groups in those communities. So that was actually one of the biggest challenges. Is we have sort of probably two different types of documents. It would be one that's kind of more generalized to Canada, and then regional. So each, like a Coast Salish community might have something that's more specific to their design language, as opposed to like if you're going up north to Haida Gwaii, Tlingit, and all those territories, they have their own because they're completely sort of separate in those design languages, as opposed to as well as Métis and Inuit, like really trying to work with professionals in those spaces that can help them define that. So like this is still really in its early stages where that's why they had the summit in the first place, was to invite these people from these communities to help build that charter. And so probably be looking at it, it's not going to happen right away. It's like maybe 2 or 3 years before anything comes out. But if you are looking to reference documents now, you can reference it. It's just called the International Indigenous Design Charter. and we'll just be probably taking like parts from that to kind of add into the Canadian version. But it's like I said, it's still kind of in its infancy.
I know there's a lot of educators in the room today. I would love to hear from any of you that have questions about the ways that you teach in your classrooms. We have a contingent from St. George's School here. Thank you for coming. If there's questions about how these resources can be brought into schools. I know when we had schools coming in to visit your exhibition, they were so keen and excited to take the 7th brochures back to their classrooms, and had questions around settler instructor, let's say, sharing those kinds of teachings, or the ways where many people who are keen to share those knowledges have questions about what that practice entails and what it looks like. And I think it's a new practice for many educators.
I think that's one of the big questions we usually get is it okay for non-Indigenous people to share this? And from what I've heard from my dad is that it's okay. It's like there's appreciation and then there's appropriation. So, you're appreciating the culture and you're educating, so it doesn't necessarily need to come from an Indigenous person. And I kind of come from that opinion as well. You might hear it differently from other members in the community, but in order to get and supercharge more Coast Salish art into the community, we're going to have to kind of let more people kind of take charge in that. And there is no sort of official document yet, an education book, which we're working on, to get more of that into the community so that people can kind of use that as a tool to educate the younger ones. So any grant research assistance in that would be amazing.
I think it would be really interesting for the school system to also start dreaming of how to embed that within their curriculums and finding ways to create resources, because everything requires resources, to produce those types of frameworks for their institutions. Any other audience questions? Any other brave educators that want to come up and take the mic? Santi? Santi.
Okay. So our school is on the Musqueam territory, and so I'm wondering, because the positioning of a school, does it matter whether you're getting permission or your information is from your local territory versus then you're from Squamish? And whether there's differences, and whether we should appreciate those differences, or how we should.
Well, I can just say for Squamish, but not for Musqueam. From my point of view, as being in the schools and educating the art, and I know I was doing more northern style, and but now moving into Coast Salish style, and just I feel it's open, as like I always share myself, that some person wanted to do a carving of Coast Salish design. I says, yeah, as long as you're keeping it for yourself and you're not carving it to sell, right? It's okay, right? And so I think it's up to each area, because for me as an individual, I'd say, yeah, have fun with it, enjoy and learn from it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I might just add too that, like, I'm sensing there's like, maybe you're a little worried that if you maybe like work with somebody who's not from the Musqueam community, that you might get in trouble.
I would say it's a bit of that, Lauren talked about complication and making it difficult for one, coming from our perspective, that is the difficulty to some extent. Mixed message.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, we have a shared design language, and that's why we're kind of talking it more broadly, like Coast Salish. So, I'm coming from the same opinion as my dad in that like we're just all equally, I know that there's Musqueam members that are also just trying to get more of their identity out there, because it's a shared collective approach. So I would come from that space saying that it would be okay. You have to also remember that there's just not many people, like First Nation, like especially when it comes to 3 host nations, there's just not many of us, and we're already like super booked with everything, right? So if you can find somebody who has the time that maybe isn't necessarily Musqueam that can come in, who's still able to teach Coast Salish, mind you, I just know everybody's so busy. It's, it's like, I'm too busy, I'm sorry.
On that note, I know we've made it our mark past the hour, and I just want to thank you, Xwalacktun and Lauren and James. It's just been so wonderful to have this conversation together and to share all of your teachings and learnings and mentorships with this great audience. And I know that the talk is being recorded, so I'm sure it will proliferate beyond from here. Together, all of us, we're grateful for the generous invitation from the Smith Foundation and our support from our gallery colleagues here who have made this event possible. We thank our family who's here, and Hannah and Grandma and everybody who's keeping us on track, and our friends and the elders and knowledge keepers and community members who continue to expand and transform and activate our understanding of this place. And lastly, our sincere gratitude to everyone that's joined this important conversation. Thank you for being here.